Happy snow day, everybody. We're actually iced in a little bit here on the ridge, so I thought it would be best for us to go ahead and go through a video today, just going through some topics so we won't be far behind when hopefully we meet on Wednesday. Wednesday, we'll spend a little time going over some art from the period, which I think will help to put some of this music we're studying in better context. So for today, let me just tell you what you're going to need. To have at your disposal while I go through some of this. You'll need your Agnus Dei and your Beatus. You'll need page 24 and 25 from your book. And then at the very end, you'll need a copy of Invention number 1. So what I've done is I've posted some pictures of the homework. I'm only posting the Agnus Dei and the Beatus. So you're going to want to get that out and check that against what I'm talking through right now. So we'll start with the Beatus and start there. So let's not forget what imitative polyphony means. Imitative polyphony means there's two or more lines working together. A lot of times you'll see that they'll have what we call a imitative point, or the interval of imitation, and a delay. In some of these pieces that we looked at, you'll see that for sure. But they actually work together, but they're an imitation, so they're not going on at the same time. So let's look at the Beatus. You'll have the key right there. I'm just going to talk through some main points there. You start with the first line in the altus. It's followed by what happens in the cantus. Notice that the clefs that may have made things counting intervals a little bit more difficult. But this leader-follower relationship goes on pretty much up until you get till measure maybe 10. So you'll see like the first follower, and you can see this on the scan that I sent, that it's actually up a fifth, one measure delay, and it's strict. And what it means by strict is the intervals are exactly the same between the leader and the follower. And this keeps going on. And what happens in measure 10, the imitation is over. You have a little bit that starts maybe in measure 9. And you'll see on my chart, you'll see a bracket and then like a squiggle. That means almost, basically, in my analysis. But what's happening in 9 at the very end, 10, and 11 is what we call free counterpoint. And what that means is that there's no imitation happening anymore between the lines or any of the melodic material. After you go through that, you'll follow it on your score. You have a new leader that comes in, and it keeps going. You'll have a very short motive, 15, 16, 17, but we're still going to call it a leader and a follower, a 2-beat delay, and up a third. Again, make sure you're checking your clefs there, because it could be a little bit different. I think the rest of it you should be okay on. There's a really tricky spot on the second page, the second system. You'll see the interval. I marked it on the score. It says instead of a fourth. You're expecting to be a fourth for it to be strict imitation, but it's got to be free imitation because that interval is different. It ends with free counterpoint on a nice solid cadence there. So you can bring this score with you to class on Wednesday, hopefully, and we can talk through it. Just make sure you mark those areas with free counterpoint and the delays. You'll see on the score sometimes I give you the actual pitch for the clefs. All right, I think we're good on that one. The Agnus Dei is a little bit trickier. A question I was going to ask in class today is if this is actually canonic imitation. And you may not be able to answer that right now, so let me give you the definition. A canonic imitation is an immediate restatement. So if you look at the Agnus Dei, right here, make sure you have your copy. At the Agnus Dei, you'll see you got leader and then follower and follower. And after that point, the altus and the tenor, they're like in a little game together, aren't they? There's all this imitation going between them, but they're exactly the same. Notice the clefs. You got the little 8 under the treble clef there, so that's giving you the actual pitch, an octave higher on the score. So in canonic imitation, the imitation is strict and it's in its entirety. First page, they're totally in canonic imitation. But if you go to the second page, you'll see that that altus and that tenor line, at the very end, it changes. And that's why, for the entirety of this piece, those two lines can't be said that they're in canonic imitation. Let's see. Let me see if there's anything else. There's not free counterpoint going on in here because at all times there's some sort of imitative polyphony. Don't be tricked. I marked it in here for your score, measure 14, between the two outer parts. They're just moving in the same direction there, but it's not imitative. Imitative, they have to be off a little bit. They can't be working at the same time. I think it'll be good once you check the score on that. So we'll talk through that on Wednesday if you need to, but I think you'll be able to go through that pretty clearly with your with the scans I will put up. Okay, so let's talk really quick through sequences. We mentioned these in class the other day. There's two types of sequences that we deal with when we're dealing with polyphonic music. The first one is a melodic sequence, and you guys have already done that. You've done this in the invention that we worked with last week. It's where you have a basic melodic line that's repeated or passage, a motive, a passage, a melodic line that's repeated and transposed in one voice. We saw that all the time, and it would just keep moving up. We talked through the Beyonce Love on Top sequence, sequence, sequence. That's kind of a long passage, but still the same principle. Now, polyphonic sequence is when you have one or more voices that are transposed and repeated. So it's like sequences happening in both lines. So grab your book or print out a copy of your book and go to page 24. Okay, so you'll see they have something there called the Bach Italian Concerto. And I would encourage you to listen to it. I'm not able to do that at the same time here on this video for right now. But if you look at what's happening in measure 61, and you look at what's happening in measure 62, the melodic line is just moving down by a second. And do you see how on the page it says polyphonic sequence and then parentheses down to one measure, down to one measure? Everything relates to what just happened. So one measure delay, down a second, down a second. So you can see how the sequence is moving down. We're not going to relate it, unlike leader-follower, where we always related it to the leader. In this instance, we're going to relate it to what just happened. But what makes this a polyphonic sequence, and you would have marked that a melodic, I know you guys would have, is that the bass line is also moving down a second. So you got the top line moving up there, moving down, and then you got the bass line also moving down. And what those tens represent are the intervals. So we call that a linear intervallic pattern, and that's where you got these recurring intervals that occur in a sequence that form between the structural tones, which are like the main important pitches of the actual sequence. So if you look at there, you got a B flat to a D. Well, that's a third, but because we're adding the octave, we're going to call it a tenth. And if you move to the next measure, you got the A to the C sharp, because the D is a suspension. You move to the next measure, you got a G to a B natural. The C is also a suspension. So the non-chord tones aren't the main structural tones there. So if you look at that pattern, you're going down in that sequence, and the main intervals made by the main structural tones are a tenth. And that's what we call a linear intervallic pattern. And so a lot of times in sequences, tens are a really popular one. You're going to see it if you look at the bottom of 24, when they take the reduction of that Italian concerto, you see 10, 10, 10, 10, and Bach's just going to keep going. So we'll see the number 10 a whole lot. I hope that makes sense, that these intervallic patterns are just the main intervals happening within the sequence. So if you go over, flip over the next page to page 25 really quick. You probably are familiar with this piece. This is the Mozart Piano Sonata, the 333. And if you listen to it, you're going to notice a pattern starting at about measure 143. You'll see you got this da 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 ba 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 dum bum ba da ba ba dum bum ba da ba ba dum bum over and over and over. And so what happens in that instance? We could sit there and you could do a Roman numeral analysis. Actually, I'd encourage you to try it for that part right there. And you're going to get a lot of secondary chords and things that maybe don't resolve as one would expect necessarily, especially the A diminished. But what's happening there, if you look at the reduction, so you can see like at measure 143, you actually have a polyphonic sequence going on there. Look at the bass line. Let's start there, and you got a chord and then and then a third, a chord and then a third, a chord and then a third, a chord and then a third. And that all that's happening there is B natural to C, A to B flat, G to C, F sharp to G. And so you're just moving up, then down a second, moving up, down a second, moving up, down a second, from the main structural pitches. That's what I'm talking about there. The top part, if you look at that, you're just going to see everything's just dropping down. So this is a polyphonic sequence because the lines are moving in the same pattern, but there's two different lines going on, which of course is why it's called polyphonic. So see the intervals there. If you look at the reduction, this is at number 1 on page 25. You can see that what they pick for their structural tones in measure 144, diminished fifth, 10th, fifth, 10th, fifth, 10th, between the structural tones. If you decide to go with version number 2 there, this is measure 144, you'll see they pick the A from the bass. Don't note that there's a treble clef there. A from the bass, and then the F, which is the second pitch. So, and then they're getting 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5. So it's the same intervals repeating while the sequence is going on. So that's our linear intervallic pattern. So anytime you have 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, or 10, 10, 10, 10, or 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 10, going between the intervals of the actual structural pitches, you probably are in some sort of sequence. And Roman numerals, they'll tell you some, but they're not telling you the whole picture of what's really happening. Because what's important is you're within a sequence, not how the secondary dominant's functioning in the 7 not resolving, things of that nature. What I want you to do for homework is I want you to try to do the Roman numerals analysis on page 25 at the top. I want you to go back to invention number 1. We did that in class the other day. Go back to invention number 1 and try to find all the polyphonic sequences. I'll tell you there's several in there. Let's do one together really quick. If you look at measure number 9, and you guys started talking about this in class, look at the bass line. It goes down, up a third, down, down a third. And then it repeats. But this time, it's a second up. Well, look at what's happening in the right hand. Down, down, up a third, down, oh, and then a couple rests, and then it repeats. That's a polyphonic sequence. So what you'll have to do is you guys are going to try to figure out where the polyphonic sequences are in invention number 1. But also, if you can figure out the linear intervallic pattern, the intervals that are going through, and we'll talk about that on Wednesday. So try to do invention number 1, add invention number 6 and 13. 6 you've already done as well, so you should be able to do that pretty quick. And invention number 13 is new. So we will take care of that on Wednesday. I look forward to seeing you. Let me know if you have any questions about this video, and we will talk soon. Thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye.